Judicial Watch, well, Tom Fenton, the head of Judicial Watch, was recently on the Lars Larson radio show, and he was talking about an issue that I had covered about a year ago to the day or to the month, and that is the government's use of fetal tissue. I had made an episode about cannibalism in the United States. I had to go back and watch it recently, so I'll apologize to you guys for how horrible I was at editing back then, but that's neither here nor there. I went back and looked at the cannibals episode because it covered specifically what Tom Fenton was talking about, actually the exact same instance. And I think me and Tom Fenton got put on this in March of last year by the Project Veritas expose that had outed Planned Parenthood for selling human fetal cells. And so we're going to go through what Tom Fenton said on the radio. We're going to look at the case that he brought, and then we're going to look at some clips from that episode that I made last year on cannibalism and how it relates to the current fight that Tom Fenton's in to expose the fact that our government and other entities are profiting by selling aborted fetal tissue. Bacteria is a sign of life on Mars, but a fully functioning human baby is not here. It just doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't wash. So now that that's out of the way, it's something that we should be talking about, because if it's never going to change one way or the other unless people are talking about it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about it, right? But let's listen to what Tom Fenton said on the Lars Larson show, and then we'll go through the rest of it. And we'll determine, hopefully, by the end of this, how you feel about the whole situation. Because you could probably be pro-choice and not support this kind of behavior, because this is, it's just the lowest of the low. I mean, we have the governmental regulations already that are supposed to be preventing this. However, they're obviously not strong enough to actually work unless you have a private entity like Tom Fenton going around figuring out that these people are doing this. Or I guess Tom Fenton's the only person who watches Project Veritas in the entire judicial system. I don't know. All right, so this is on Lars Larson. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. I'll get back to your phone calls and emails shortly, but you know, the government, at the federal level, they're talking about loosening abortion regulations. Other states like Arkansas has actually laid down the law and said, listen, we're going to put up a challenge that will likely end up at the Supreme Court to test whether or not Roe v. Wade finally holds or not. But while all that is going on, Tom Fenton, the president of Judicial Watch, has been doing all the hard work out in the vineyards, trying to scare up the information that we need, like whether or not the U.S. government has been involved in illegally buying aborted baby parts, as grotesque as that sounds. Tom, welcome back. What has Judicial Watch learned?
Well, we learned they had the receipts, literally, for fetal organs, courtesy of your tax dollars at the FDA.
Leave it to Tom Fenton to literally bring the receipts. So his FOIA request uncovered the government literally has receipts for baby parts.
And we've been suing in court to get access to this information. And Lars, I've been doing this for 22, 23 years. I've never seen anything so horrible as and grotesque as the list of body parts and the costs next to them that your tax dollars were going to purchase on behalf of a program to create, quote, humanized mice, for use in HIV research.
He talks right there that this program that he was digging at is a program to make humanized mice, okay? So remember when everybody made fun of Alex Jones because he was screaming that they're making human-animal hybrids? Remember when he was saying that and he was mocked? Well, a humanized mice is a animal-human hybrid, okay? And this case coming out of this area is the exact case that I was looking at a year ago as well. So yeah, that's what they're using the aborted fetal cell tissue for making animal-human hybrids. This is scary. Creating human-animal hybrids is a little bit crazy. But matter of fact, like all the things that they're doing with genetics is a little bit crazy. That's why gene modification, gene therapy, is a weapon of mass destruction, according to the United States government. and how easy it's getting ready to be able to be completed is truly terrifying, because you don't have to create this huge being, right, to be Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster, Dr. Frankenstein's monster, would have been really scary had he patched together a virus instead of an entire multi-organed animal. Because in reality, that's how it's going to start. It will start at the cellular level and below. And right now, all you have to do is to be able to create a string of proteins. So, like, as soon as the CV came out, right? They came out with the synthesis of it, and you could look at it and you could list it. That also means that it can be created. Just saying.
The Advanced BioSciences Research is the name of the company, and the FDA and NIH purchased the organs from that company. And they didn't want to give us all the documents, including where some of these labs are that were creating these organs. And the court wanted none of that. And this is what the court said in describing the whole program. The company sold second trimester livers and thymi for hundreds of dollars apiece. The same for brains, eyes, and lungs. After tacking on fees for services like shipping and cleaning, ABR could collect over $2,000 for a single fetus they purchased from Planned Parenthood for $60. The federal government participated in this potentially illicit trade for years.
So the federal government's participating in this. They are selling. Planned Parenthood is selling the fetal tissue to the fetuses to this company. And this company's turning around and selling it to the NIH and all these other places for $2,000. $2,000. Can we just take a side note and just realize that the value that the institutions like Planned Parenthood and this corporation put on the human life is $60 and $2,000?
While out in the public, the controversy that began with hidden video recordings that showed Planned Parenthood negotiating the prices that they would get, that the FDA knew this was going on. Trafficking in human body parts, and there's no question this is illegal activity, right?
Well, the court suggested it was illegal. The law prohibits that type of transaction from taking place. I tell you, last year when you see documents where the demand is put in writing that they want the organs, quote, fresh and never frozen, it's just hard to express the outrage of that behind such grotesque operations.
It is, and I guess
it was stopped by the Trump administration, and of course, the establishment wanted to start it up again, of course, using COVID as the pretext.
But here's the thing: if a scientist believes that they could make some massive scientific advance, say in HIV research, if they want to go to the Congress and say, listen, this is what we'd like to do and would like you to pass a bill, the people's representatives are free to change the law. If they wanted to go to the FDA and say, can we go through the process? Can you allow us a waiver of whatever regulations exist? They could do that too. But that would be transparent. Tom, you're in the legal world. You know what the Latin phrase, what is it, mens rea, the guilty mind? When somebody is doing something like this secretly, when they could go at it legitimately. Now, they might be told, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. The Congress could say no. The FDA could say, we will not grant a waiver for that. If you want it, go get the law changed. And then they'd have to deal with the people's representatives. But when they do it in a sneaky fashion this way, then that tells me they got mens rea, the guilty mind, because they know that what they're doing is wrong. So they have to do it under cover of darkness.
Yeah, and you may recall there were some videos that came out, and of course, those who created the videos were targeted for attack because they exposed these transactions. The other side will say that this was not a profit. This was valuable. This wasn't the quote valuable consideration under the law. So they're going to argue what they did was legal. My view is the Justice Department should have been investigating this. Beyond shutting it down, they should have been doing criminal investigations. And here we highlight the court. He didn't need to get to the question of whether it was legal or not because he found that we could get the documents under other legal theories, but he certainly raised questions about it. And I encourage your listeners to go to our website, look at the individual documents, look at the court decision that at least one federal court judge shares our concerns about the potential illegality. So it's not like we're just pretending this is an issue when, in fact, it isn't.
Well, Tom, let me go. Allow me a little latitude on this. Donald Trump always talked about the deep state, that there were parts of our government that effectively operate without any kind of oversight from Congress or the administration. Because the next question I'd ask is, well, if this was in the DOJ, if this was in the FDA, those are both agencies that were under the control of the Trump administration for 4 years. And you might say reasonably, well, why didn't they do something about it? And I would suggest, and you can give me your view on it, the deep state. The deep state said, we agree with this kind of stuff. We're letting it happen, and we're not going to allow the current administration, elected by the people, meaning the Trump administration, to do anything about it. In fact, they'll never even know about it. Is that possible? That's what was happening? Why it wasn't pursued by the Trump administration?
Well, I think, as I said, the agency stopped it because they knew about the public outrage, and many Trump appointees, morally and legally opposed this. But you're raising questions about the next step. Where was the accountability? I'm not seeing evidence there was. I think there might have been an investigation or two that went nowhere. I'm not aware of anything happening.
This is where Tom Fenton is kind of hampered by what he can say legally. See, Lars Larson can go way off the cuff and say whatever he wants, but as a legal mind, Tom Fenton has to be very precise with his words, and he can only say what he can prove, right? And if he's speculating, he'll say it beforehand, and wild speculation is just out of the question. Lars is doing his wild speculation, but his general idea is like, why didn't the Trump administration go after these government entities after they were put on camera? Why didn't they investigate it? And my humble assertion would be that where did you see accountability for anything during the Trump administration? The bureaucracy that never leaves runs Washington, and there's just there was nothing Trump could do, and he wanted to. The only difference between, I think, Trump and other presidents is that when Trump came into the presidency, he wanted to use the office of the presidency to exert his will, not the will of the people who had been in the area for a long time, but his own will, his own idea, because he thought it was better, and that's who he was. So he wanted to use the presidency to bend the world to his heel, right? And all that his failure shows us is that the president is not powerful enough to do that. And the question would be, is this because of this wonderful separation of powers that we have, that the Congress takes some of the president's power and the judicial arm takes some of the president's power, and that's what prevented him from doing it? And I could say, yeah, I do think that especially the judicial system was used in many ways to hamper President Trump in ways that he probably should have been hampered, because he wrote a lot of executive orders as well. But I would say more than anything, Trump was hampered by the bureaucracy. And what it showed disturbingly to me was that the bureaucracy was capable of neutering a president and hunkering down for 4 years. And then, they could do what they did. So if what had happened last November didn't happen and Trump had actually gotten in, I don't know that the bureaucracy would have been able to hold down another 4 years. I think he might have been able to make headway, and that would have been interesting to watch. But as it stands, they didn't have to, because they accomplished what they set out to in November. And I'm just going to leave it at that, because you have to be so careful talking about what happened in November. I know what you did last winter. So, yeah, Lars Larson's like, oh, it was the evil deep state that prevented anything from happening here. Well, yeah, it was. It didn't get done. Just like everything else that he had started is unraveling now as well. The bureaucracy clearly won. And
as I said, that they're, they weren't that scared of what they had done legally, because they were pushing for restarting the program, as I said, using the pretext of COVID.
Wow. Well, is there any likelihood that any of these people who are participating in this will go to jail or be charged?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe this public information we're putting out there will contribute to pressure by the Justice Department to do something here. But What's past is prologue for some of this corruption. If it's part of the left's agenda, it rarely goes punished.
And I agree with you there. I think the left looks at it as anything associated with abortion. They're going to stand up and defend, no matter how morally indefensible it is. Tom, congrats on getting that information. That's Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch, prying loose information with a federal court order to order the Department of Health and Human Services to release information that it has in its possession about the purchase of organs harvested from aborted human beings. And the court said there is real reason whether the transactions violate federal law, and your federal government was involved in it.
All right, so we're going to go and we're going to look at the legal stuff around the Judicial Watch case. But first, he referenced the Project Veritas video and the Planned Parenthood lady, and I covered that in my previous episode. I'm going to play a cut of that episode, and after that, we'll go through the court order. So this is, from my last episode on cannibalism, and it's regarding exactly the case that he's talking about, followed by the Project Veritas video, all right? It's not hard to find out who is pushing these agendas, who it is that wants us to find this more acceptable. All you have to do is watch the Ellen Show.
Well, it's this way in which one forces through microneedling. It's like a little roller with these, some of you, I think many of you know it, and it pushes through the skin and ruptures the collagen and then boosts it. You look like a burn victim for a day, but then it pushes the
What are you pushing into the skin, Sandra?
Sarah?
Terry? What are you pushing into the skin?
Well, you push in whatever the facialist would like to insert into your pores.
But what is it?
It is an extraction from a piece of skin that came from a young person.
And the worst part about watching this, guys, is listening to the crowd laugh as she reveals this. That is the worst part of this.
Far away, and they somehow figured out how to extract.
It's foreskin from a Korean baby. That's what it is.
Who
comes up with this?
I don't think.
And the banner across the bottom. Would you go for a penis facial with Sandra Bullock? This shit is crazy. It really is.
Don't think. It's not like I'm lying there with little pieces all over my face. It's like.
Who thinks of collecting it and having it for, we'll do something with this someday.
And why didn't we come up with that?
Right. To be rich.
And so we call it, I call it the penis facial. And I think when you see how good it is to your face, you too will run to your local facialist and say, give me the penis.
First of all, that would be called an esthetician. Somebody who gives facials is an esthetician. I'm pretty sure there's no such thing as a facialist, but moving on from that, this is on daytime television, guys. This is like, I don't know how else to say that, except to say this is rated G or PG information for the rest of the world right now. That's the world we live in. Sandra Bullock sits on the Ellen Show, talks about having extracted baby foreskin injected into her face, and the world laughs. That's the world we live in. Moving on. You see how flippantly at which she jokes about that, as if it's funny. I assume some people find it funny. And if you think about how massive the black market must be in China, there must have been a massive cutoff in whoever deals in that black market, because you see Kirkland can't even keep toilet paper at Costco. If they're not exporting, then all of these things that China was providing to these sick people, they've been cut off from that. But they're not totally screwed. Why? Well, because there's a black market for baby parts in America. Project Veritas exposed that, and it seems like everybody just forgot.
And the mechanics of it was that Heather, a Novogenics person, would come to the site and our staff would sign the patients up and get consent, and we didn't do anything. So it was compensation for this, and we didn't do anything. So it was compensation for this, and I don't know what you're used to doing, how are you used to doing compensation? Patients don't get anything, of course. And we don't want to be in the position of being accused of selling tissue and stuff like that. On the other hand, there are costs associated with the use of our space and all that kind of stuff. So what were you thinking about?
Right. So So I'd like to start at around 100.
Okay. Now, this is for tissue that you actually take, not just the tissue that the person volunteered that you can't find anything. Right?
Exactly.
So yeah, you guys, I'll put a link in the description where you can go watch the Project Veritas videos in their entirety. But once again, they broke amazing news that was just like earth-shattering, and nobody cared. Human Services granted a second 90-day extension to a contract it has with the University of California at San Francisco that requires UCSF to make humanized mice for ongoing AIDS research. The human fetal tissue comes from late-term abortions. CNS News reported that according to an estimate it has published on its website, the National Institute of Health, which is a division of Health and Human Services, will spend $95 million this fiscal year alone on research that, like UCSF's humanized mouse contract, uses human fetal tissue. So if you guys want to visit any of the links that I went through in that previous video, you can just go to the pinned comment below that video. I'll link the video in the pinned comment below this. It's, a much longer video covering the topic of cannibalism in the United States. And it does have articles where Trump did try to make executive orders to get rid of this. The problem is they were able to counteract those executive orders inside of the bureaucracy, and they basically ate it and then moved on. Just like with the Operation Choke Point, when Trump forced them to make these policy changes, except now they've been rescinded now that Biden's in, because again, the bureaucracy is in control of the government. It's pretty amazing, actually. So let's go look at the Judicial Watch paperwork on this. Here we are at the March 15th press release by Judicial Watch. Federal court slams potentially illicit sales of body parts of aborted fetuses, orders release of additional information on organ purchases. Judicial Watch announced today that in federal court has ordered the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to release additional information about its purchases of organs harvested from aborted human fetuses. The court also found, quote, there is reason to question whether the transactions violated federal law barring the sale of fetal organs, which it obviously did. Documents previously uncovered in this lawsuit show that the federal government demanded the purchased fetal organs be, quote, fresh and never frozen. Both the FDA and the NIH purchased the organs from California-based Advanced BioSciences Research, or ABR, to create, quote, humanized mice for use in HIV research. ABR's partners with Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers to dismember fetuses and sell their parts for research. ABR partners with Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers to dismember fetuses and sell their parts for research. The decision notes that ABR sold second trimester livers and thigh meat for hundreds of dollars a piece, the same for brains, eyes, and lungs. After tacking on fees for services like shipping and cleaning, ABR could collect over $2,000 on a single fetus it purchased from Planned Parenthood for $60. The federal government participated in this potentially illicit trade for years. How is it potentially illicit? The court raised concern about whether these transactions are legal. Happily for the government, this means that the court need not reach Judicial Watch's argument that the government cannot withhold the information at issue because ABR engaged in criminal conduct. Recall that it is illegal to transfer, quote, any human fetal tissue for valuable consideration. Judicial Watch contends that the invoices disclosed here show that the government paid, quote, valuable consideration to ABR, and so the government cannot keep the withheld information confidential. So you have, once again, a situation where Judicial Watch is filing a FOIA request and the government is blocking it, and the Judicial Watch is having to say, look, we have proof here that what they were participating is illegal. It must be released. You can't protect something from Freedom of Information Act if it's known that that issue was illegal. That's what the entire Freedom of Information Act was created for. The court found it dubious that a Freedom of Information Act exemption invoked by the government could be used to shield illegal business practices under the guise of confidential business information, and declared that there is reason to question the lawfulness of the transaction between the government and ABR. In a ruling in Judicial Watch's favor, U.S. District Court Judge Trevor N. McFadden ordered HHS to disclose any currently withheld names and addresses of ABR's contract laboratories, any redacted unit pricing information for fetal tissue, shipping, or other fees and services relating to the 2013-2015 years that can be found in the fee schedules appended in the United States Senate Judiciary Committee report entitled Human Fetal Tissue Research, Context and Controversy. Any redacted per specimen pricing information for the second trimester fetal tissue relative to the 2016 through 2018 years. Judicial Watch initially filed its lawsuit in March of 2019, so about a year ago, after HHS failed to respond adequately to a September 2018 FOIA request, where Judicial Watch asks for all contracts and related documentation between the FDA and ABR for the provision of human fetal tissue to be used in humanized mice research. All records reflecting the disbursement of funds to ABR for the provision of human fetal tissue to be used in humanized mice research. All guidelines and procedural documents provided to ABR by the FDA relating to the acquisition and extraction of human fetal tissue for its provision to the FDA for humanized mice research. All communications between the FDA officials and employees and representatives of ABR related to the provision of ABR to the FDA of human fetal tissue for the purpose of humanized mice research. This court victory will shed additional light on the federal government's barbaric practice of purchasing organs of aborted human beings, said Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton. The American people deserve to know how their tax dollars are being spent on this grotesque and potentially illegal activity. In June 2020, Judicial Watch uncovered records from the FDA showing that between 2012 and 2018, the FDA entered into 8 contracts worth $96,370 with ABR to acquire fresh and never frozen tissue from the first and second trimester aborted fetuses for use in creating humanized mice for ongoing research. Back in December of 2016, Chuck Grassley did what only any human being could do after they were brought this information, and he referred Planned Parenthood and the organization that Planned Parenthood was selling the fetal tissue to be investigated by the FBI. So this is a perfect example of yet again how the bureaucracy makes it impossible for anything to be done, because you have these elected officials who get this information, like Chuck Grassley, and are horrified by it. They refer it to the police, where they, quote, investigate it and bury it. Because there's no real investigation done, right? Because you're now talking about this giant behemoth of an organism that it's all one thing. So, and it's not going to investigate it. So, like, we always are like, well, oh yeah, the police department wants to investigate itself. Like, that's ridiculous. So you need an IG or somebody outside of the police department to investigate it. Well, the government is all the government. It's all the government. There is no entity inside the government that could have investigated this. The FBI is going to squash what the government wants squashed, because it is the government. Grassley said, I don't take lightly making a criminal referral, but the seeming disregard for the law by these entities has been fueled by decades of utter failure by the Justice Department to enforce it. And unless there is a renewed commitment by everyone involved against commercializing the trade in aborted fetal body parts for profit, then the problem is likely to continue. And it did. Now that the Trump administration has been sidelined and is out of the way, this is only going to get significantly worse. Or better, depending on how you see this. God help me, there are people who think this is going to get better. What do we need? I mean, what is the argument here? We need free trade in fetal tissue? Oh, good God help us all. So we're at Cornell Law School. We're talking about 42 U.S. Code 289G-2 prohibitions regarding human fetal tissue. Well, pretty self-explanatory in the title. But they're going to take the marijuana approach to this, right? It might be federally illegal, but we're going to look the other way. We're not going to enforce this. And, you know, the giant proponents for this will say, because somebody has to be advancing science, you know, these human fetal tissue cells are absolutely a necessity for the continuation of certain sciences. And these brave politicians are defending science. That's the argument. They're defending science against life. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. I got more content coming. Love you guys. If you want to leave a tip, the way to do so are in the pinned comment below. Peace.